Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Lewiński. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky met his Polish counterpart Karol Nawrocki in Warsaw, cementing strategic ties despite political differences. Zelensky's ongoing efforts remain focused on the US-brokered peace talks. Yet Russia, the aggressor state, keeps sending belligerent signals and maximalist demands. Can Trump's peace initiative reach a positive conclusion, even though Moscow's commitment to the talks seems superficial at best? Joining us now is Professor Oleksiy Haran, Research Director of the Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thank you for the invitation.
I'm glad that you could join us here today. So first of all, can you give us a brief comment concerning President Zelensky's visit to Warsaw? How is this visit being discussed? How is it perceived in Ukraine?
Well, to sum it up, we consider it's positive. Basically, I think it's the first meeting, right, between two presidents, so it's very important, I would say. Before that, there were some discussions, I would say. There were some misunderstandings, some problems. We may call it differently, but it was important for two presidents to meet. So in this sense, I think it's positive. It doesn't mean that we do not have problems in our relations. But what is important is that Poland confirmed that it remains its strategic ally to Ukraine. And so we hope that there would be a joint line regarding Ukraine between Prime Minister and President, despite some differences between them in approaches and narratives. And from Ukrainian side, we need to do a lot to, I wouldn't say to restore, because, Poland always remained ally to Ukraine, especially if we are talking about military sphere. The supply of weapons through the territory of Poland never stopped, and we really appreciate it. But again, we hope that now there would be additional stimulus to have good relations despite that we have different narratives and we have some problems regarding, for example, history, which was dramatic history during World War II, and also some competition in economic sphere. I mean, Ukrainian agriculture productions, which goes through Poland. But nevertheless, we hope to a good, normal relations between our countries.
One of the issues that was touched upon by the Polish president was what he referred to as gratitude for those first months of support, but also the inclusion of Poland in various negotiating formats. To what extent is this an issue that Ukraine can actually control, and to what extent some of these formats may have actually not included representatives of our region, Central and Eastern Europe, focusing instead on Western European countries because of decisions that were made basically outside of Ukraine's influence?
Well, good question. Look, first of all, I would say that Ukraine doesn't control everything in these negotiations, but we actually relies on support from our European allies, including Poland. When I am saying that we are not controlling everything, there is President Trump's position, which is, we know that President Trump's position on different issues, it may change in a short period of time, back and forth. But European position is really important, because we see that Trump is buying actually some Russian narratives. And in some cases, he is putting responsibility on Ukraine, not on Russia, which looks to be very strange. So that's why, the support from European allies is very, very important. And there are consultations all the time with our European allies. And among them is Poland as well. Because President Tusk also participated in consultations between European leaders and President Zelensky.
Do you think that right now this is where the entire discussion is going to focus on, essentially what the allies of Ukraine, what countries which are participating in the peace process are going to do? We have the upcoming negotiations, actually ongoing to some extent. They're already there in the United States, in Miami. We've talked with the Russian delegation coming up next. But we also had a comment from French President Emmanuel Macron, and I would just like, to talk about that briefly. He said that it would be useful for Europe to re-engage in talks with Vladimir Putin. Do you think that this is the way to go? I mean, countries of our region understand that Putin remains a threat. Do you think that Western European countries still harbor hopes for restoration of ties with Moscow?
Well, the fact that some country is a threat doesn't prevent contacts, right? But I think that in the present situation, the words of Macron may be interpreted by Russia as weakness of our Western allies. So I think that in general context, it could be read like this. I can explain the words of Macron as a sign that to demonstrate to Mr. Trump that, well, we also want to improve relations with Russia because, Trump is always saying like that. For him, it's important to have a kind of business deal with Russia. And as I have said, unfortunately, sometimes it looks like President Trump is taking the wrong side arguments. But maybe what President Macron said should look like, well, we, Europe, we do not, we also think that it's impossible to improve relations, it's necessary, it's good, but as I have said, it could be interpreted by Russia as a weakness. So that's why I heard the Ukrainian experts, Ukrainian commentators, and basically it's kind of general view here that this is not a good narrative, I think, not only for Ukraine, but in general, for negotiations, potential negotiations and relations with Russia.
So at the same time, Vladimir Putin keeps engaging in a campaign of deception. During his annual press event, he was trying to shift the blame on Ukraine. Once again, he was talking about the root causes of the conflict. At the same time, we had another attack in the Odessa region. Again, there were casualties. Do you think that there will come a point when the United States will acknowledge the fact that Russia's commitment to this peace process is in fact fraudulent, because they are still planning on military advances? They want to take all of the regions that they believe are Russian, which they are not, and so forth.
Right. For us, it's understandable. I think for Europeans, most of them understand that, overwhelming majority of them, I would say, understand that Putin will not stop if he is not stopped in Ukraine. We remember, I think it's very, very important what Czech president said about it's not possible to talk about withdrawal from Donbass, because in this case it would resemble what happened in Czechoslovakia in 1938, when Czechoslovakia, under Western pressure, gave up Sudetenland to Germany, and it didn't stop aggression. However, in the mind of President Trump, it could look differently, unfortunately. And my feeling is that the US continues to pressure Ukraine to make concessions to Russia, and this is very, very dangerous. But again, we don't know what's going to full extent what's going on behind the scene. At least I think. Yes, you are demonstrating now the map for our viewers. It looks, you see Donbas, and what Putin demands is that Ukraine withdraws from blue part, non-occupied part of Donbas, which actually would leave Ukraine without line of fortifications. So pressure on Ukraine here is very, very dangerous, and not only for Ukraine but also for Europe, because it creates precedent not only for Europe, for the whole world, because it would mean for presidency that well, you can occupy part of the territory and continue to move in that direction. So we don't know what would be the final Trump's position, but Ukraine is fighting, to make this plan acceptable to Ukraine. And here we rely on European position. So that's why it's so...
Yes. Are there any positives so far from the reports that we have? For example, concerning security guarantees, there are mentions of security guarantees which could mirror NATO's Article 5. And also a related question, do you think that finally it will come to a point when Ukraine will make some concessions, the US will say, okay, now it's Russia's turn, do you accept? And Russia will say, no, we don't, and the war will keep dragging on?
Let's start from the end. Ukraine actually accepts huge concession and dramatic concession from our side. We are talking about freezing the line. Freezing the line means that millions of Ukrainians will remain in the occupied areas. Well, we hope temporarily, occupied areas of Ukraine. So far, we don't have possibility to liberate it because of the lack of support from the United States. So for us, it's a huge compromise, because what's happening in the occupied territories. There is huge pressure on Ukrainians in order to destroy everything Ukrainian on these territories. But okay, we are ready for this. Very painful for us, I would say, compromise. But, to pressure Ukraine to withdraw from Donbas, the whole Donbas, this is totally different. We are not a loser, we are not defeated, in this war. We are not going to capitulate. So I think this approach is wrong, but we do not know what will happen finally. And in this sense, we can rely only on Ukrainian army, which is fighting right now.
Professor, we have unfortunately reached the end of our conversation for today, but thank you very much for joining us here and for sharing your insight. Professor Oleksiy.
Add just one phrase. Phrase. We need real security guarantees, not like it happened with Budapest Memorandum, which appeared to be a piece of paper, just to be thrown out.
And that is a very important point indeed. Professor Oleksiy Haran was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And I'm Jonasz Lewicki. You're watching TVP World. Please do stay with us.